Donald Trump was a whiz businessman that was going to fix the American economy.
Steel tariffs created about 1,000 jobs for steelmakers who were protected by tariffs. They reduced employment by 75,000.
They're confused. They don't know what's going on. They did not vote for harder times.
Let's hop into a CNN panel that's covering the political backlash from the failed second Trump administration, at least the incompetence and corruption. I don't know if we can say failed 2 months in, but lock in, leave us a like if you haven't already. It helps the channel out a ton, and let's get right into the debate.
When Donald Trump won, I thought that 75, 80 million Americans were all captured by the MAGA cult and that they would go along with whatever President Trump said. And I was wrong. There are a lot of people who voted very purely and clearly on the fact that they were experiencing economic distress and they wanted that economic distress to come to an end. I'm hearing from these people. I'm hearing from brothers who believed not in all of the social things or the rhetoric or the religious part of who Donald Trump is, but in the actuality, in their minds, that Donald Trump was a whiz businessman that was going to fix the American economy. They're confused. They don't know what's going on. They did not vote for harder times. And the reality is, as much spin as can be done on any network, it is going to be, in my opinion, irreparable harm done to the president's reputation if people experience a tremendous amount of pain.
Spot on. These people convinced themselves so bad that they had a mandate that they never really had. Obviously, within their cult, they're just going to sign off on whatever they do. Maybe that led them to have this confidence that was undeserved because their cult represents a very small minority of America. Largely, they won this election because of the economic feel with COVID, inflation, and such that was bad. I mean, it's a lot of the same reasonings you could give for Trump losing in 2020. Without COVID, he probably wins, right? Trump was viewed as a business whiz who spun a good game about fixing things. Definitely better than Biden, and he had more time to do so than Kamala. And I think a lot of people also view his first pre-COVID term with rose-tinted glasses as well. So now that the first 2 months have been, well, anything but the economic prosperity that he's promised, you're going to lose those in the middle who don't care about trans people, don't care about immigrants being criminals, but they thought you really would bring down prices on day one, like you promised. And we've seen this reflected in the massive political shift in these special elections.
I need to correct the record because I feel like I hear a lot of conservatives talking about, oh, the last time when Trump was in office, he put in those tariffs and everything was fine. Okay, here is JP Morgan talking about what happened the last time when he put in those tariffs. Steel tariffs created about 1,000 jobs for steelmakers who were protected by tariffs. They reduced employment by 75,000 in steel-using industries such as autos and construction as prices rose and sales fell. Similarly, in all industries affected by Trump's tariffs, duties boosted factory employment by 0.4%, but reduced payrolls by 2% because of overall costs rising and retaliatory
By the way,
tariffs. It costs jobs to raise prices.
By the way, there's something else to pay attention to when you're looking at the job creation from the tariffs in the first Trump administration, the price per job. When you look at some of the jobs that were created, you're paying, in one case, like $815,000 per job for the jobs that were created.
And it's because tariffs have multiplicative effects. It may create minimal jobs in some niche sector, but the job loss in all the other sectors that rely on that will always far outweigh because, well, say a steel tariff may lead to a U.S. steel factory opening that employs a couple hundred or two opening that employs 1,000, but it will lead to the industries that rely on steel to lay off tens of thousands of workers just to keep up their profit margins, all while killing our GDP, raising our prices, and as the black gentleman points out, these minimal benefits that we see in the hundreds or thousand workers that do get created in the niche sector, it has a pricey cost associated with it where you should be able to create these jobs for a far less price tag. It's in no way worth it, especially not when it's not being met with domestic investment, these tariffs, of course, to drive this sort of manufacturing.
I think what is true today was true for Joe Biden and every other president that came before either of these two guys. If people feel like their economic trajectory is on the upswing, they will give you political leash. And if they feel like their own trajectory is on the downswing, they will punish you. You go back to Ronald Reagan, and he even though there were hard times in that first Reagan term, people felt like the country was getting back on the right track. They were willing to give him time because they believed in his program. They believed in the confidence that Reagan was projecting about America. That's what Trump has to do here. To the people that you think are going to be impacted in the short term, and they may well be, and Trump has acknowledged that, he has to make them believe that the long-term implications for this and their communities is worth it, even if they're experiencing a little short-term pain.
I actually kind of agree with Scott's sentiment at the beginning here. I do think voters largely will reflect economic feel rather than, partisan beliefs or anything. But I do want to point out that not only were voters very much wrong giving that confidence or belief to Reagan, but the context was a lot different. Reagan, he at least had economic theory that he could point to that he was implementing, right? Supply side economics, or trickle down economics, as it's probably more known as, which we now know is a massive failure. Anyone touting it now, we would say, well, you're either rich or stupid, right? But then it didn't really have the kind of real world tests or applications, at least not to what we have now with Reagan, Bush, and Trump's failures trying it. So you could maybe understand why people bought in there. Here, however, not only was Trump selling himself as the fix everything immediately guy, but he has no economic theory to point to now when he's saying, well, just trust me for these years of suffering. He's acting recklessly. Many in his own cabinet can't even explain his goals or the purpose. And again, we've seen the massive shifts in how voters are feeling from these special elections where his win margins were cut in half, where we won a state that he won. I think Trump is doing more damage to the Republican Party than the left ever could, and he's doing it single-handedly. It's hilarious because when he won this election, I was pissed because he was just handed the easiest win of all time in terms of legacy. Biden had fixed the COVID mess. He had cleaned up largely what Trump had made worse than it should have been, slashing OPEC, not allowing states to open up when they should by holding protective equipment, not investing in infrastructure, these kinds of things, where Trump came in just as it was all steadying out. Inflation had been dropping month after month. Prices were dropping. Wages were increasing. Job numbers were overperforming. And Trump could come in largely just do nothing. Keep saying, oh, it's a mess. It's a disaster. I was handed a disaster. He could just do nothing. And then in a year claim, well, I fixed Biden's economy, and he could get all the credit while just coasting like he did in his first term. Yet this time he couldn't help but shoot himself in the foot.